Retro.
Hi, this is Vanessa Marshall, voice of Hera and Rook Cast, and you're listening to Dennis and Jay on Podcast Stardust. Their behavior is continually unexpected.
Welcome to Podcast Stardust. This is the fully armed and operational podcast dedicated to Star Wars news, reviews, and discussion. I'm Dennis Keithley.
And I'm Jay Krebs.
And we are talking about Asajj Ventress, specifically her appearance on Tales of the Underworld in this episode. But before we start with that, Jay, I want to remind everybody what our social media contacts are.
Sure. We are very easily found on Facebook and Instagram at Podcast Stardust.
All right. The dish is aligned. The signal's boosted to maximum output. The shield is down. We are now broadcasting to the galaxy. So, like I just said, we're going to talk about Tales of the Underworld, more specifically the first 3 episodes that feature Asajj Ventress. Don't worry, we'll get to Cad Bane in a few weeks and talk about his story. But yeah, here we are. This will be a full spoiler discussion. So let's kick it off, Jay, with a brief non-spoiler review of what we thought about these 3 episodes. What did you think?
Well, of course, I love Asajj Ventress. I love anything with Asajj Ventress. So it was so great to get to revisit her and also get to see some things that answered some questions for us and also get to view her in, a different way than what we've gotten to see of her before as far as her history as an assassin and a Sith apprentice and even from what we know of her in the Bad Batch. So it was a great set of stories in this arc, and I appreciated every moment. But what about you?
Yeah, I found it very satisfying on this. And the key reason for that we'll get to in just a bit. But I thought the writing, the dialogue was excellent in this. We had good character growth for Asajj throughout the 3 episodes. I mean, it could have been one episode that would have run about 40 minutes. You could have compiled all the credits there at the end to 5, as opposed to having them 5 minutes per each one. I think is about what it came out to, and all this, and that would have been fine too. But this was a neat little Star Wars story when it came down to it that answered questions that we had about this character, kind of evolved the Star Wars universe a little bit more, kind of filled in, that gap of the Empire from Revenge of the Sith and A New Hope. And I really, really liked it. And I highly encourage everyone to go out and watch this.
For sure.
Okay, so that is our non-spoiler thoughts, all 1 minute and 30 seconds of it. But let's get into some more specifics about all this. Before we get into the details, this is something I always want to remark on and then usually fail to do so. But the music in this that the Kiners wrote was
beautiful.
so good on this. I mean, they don't disappoint. But, we often talk about how Dave Filoni is kind of the heir to George Lucas when it comes to that brand of Star Wars storytelling. Well, Kiner is the heir to John Williams when it comes. I mean, there's no one that does music more similar to Williams than the Kiners.
It's true.
And yeah, so that really stood out to me while I was watching this. Okay, but we got 3 episodes. We'll take them on one at a time. The first one is A Way Forward, and this answers the question we've all been asking since we saw Asajj show up in the Bad Batch, which was, how did she come back in all this? And I guess it wasn't too much of a surprise. I can't remember what they called the waters that they put her in that village there on Dathomir, but she went in there and we got, well, she didn't go in there. Quinlan Voss put her in there and, is basically a funeral with Obi-Wan on hand. And as he's laying her to rest, he says, he'll always love her, and a tear splatters on her hand. And the voice of Talzin shows up and tells Asajj that she can make a choice, that he's left her with a gift. She can either stay there with her sisters in that realm, or she can move on back to the living. And when she asks what it'll cost, the answer is your heart's desire. And she decides to return to the living. What did you make of all that?
Oh my gosh. Well, first of all, Dark Disciple crushed me. I don't really cry very often at novels, and this one was I was blubbering fool at the end. And so to see this come to life, even and I hate to say just in animation because animation is amazing and we've always gotten so many amazing stories from it, but to see this come to life just meant so much to me,
Mm-hmm.
honestly. And I believe they were called the Sacred Waters, I wanna say.
Sure.
So just observing this and just getting to see this was such a gift. And so the idea that, Talzin says that she can make this choice to either stay there or, give up her heart's desire and return to life. So I don't know if by returning to life she truly believed that she would have to give up Quinlan for the long run, or if there was maybe, well, heck, I cheated death, maybe there's a way, like a loophole that I can get around because I mean, we know how much from Dark Disciple Quinlan meant to her.
Yeah.
But then again, I mean, Asajj is also no stranger to loss and to the idea that she needs to be redeemed in other ways. So, so there's that as well.
Yeah. I'm not. This is going to be probably something that we bring up a couple times during our discussion of these 3 episodes here. So, she's there under the water, and then her spirit kind of rises out of this pond, lake, whatever it is. And, because she sees Quinlan and Obi-Wan from beneath the surface.
Mhm.
And she has to give up her heart's desire, which is apparently Quinlan. But I'm not sure why she made the choice to go back to the living as opposed to staying with Talzin and her sisters on that. Do you have an answer for that? I mean, because, it's because she does show an interest when she hears Quinlan's name, from the kid who we'll talk about here in a second. She, her ears perk up at that. And that's like her initial motivation for pursuing the path
Mhm.
here. But then later she gives that up completely. And she decides she can't pursue it, and it's not like made aware of any consequences if she were to pursue Quinlan Voss. She has to give up her heart's desire. So does that mean she no longer has the desire, or something will befall her if she does pursue Quinlan?
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. So my thought was the whole loophole thing that she could
Hmm.
maybe figure out a way around that. But, maybe in the end she just chose her own path. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That she had this new beginning and the implications of that are that maybe she felt that Quinlan would be better off without her, but yet she didn't want to remain kind of stranded, if you will, in the land of the underworld, that there was a lot more option available to her if she did return,
See,
understanding that the implications of that is that she had to, go a different path.
right? Because see, the thing is, like, I was wrestling with that notion here, which is, well, why did she return? So that she could lead a new life. Well, what was the life she chose? Is kind of the bouncer at a terminal in a starport.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
she starts off by saying, it's like, I don't want that life anymore, referring to her old life as an assassin for Dooku. But it's not like she chose. It's not like she returned from the dead and chose to be like a warrior for the light necessarily. Her first instinct was to seek out a quiet life, avoid the empire, and just like not be involved in any of that stuff.
mhm,
And that's what I'm just struggling with here, which is why did she make that choice to come back? And she experiences growth over these 3 episodes, and that she seems to find something of a purpose, and she seems to be able to reconcile some things that happened in her past. But that doesn't seem to be why she made the choice in the first place, with
right.
all of this.
Yeah, I can
And
see where there's a disconnect there. Mhm,
yeah, well, I'm not saying it's necessarily a flaw with these 3 episodes, but there's something that motivated her. And I don't think it's clear here what that is. It is and it may be what you're saying, which is she didn't necessarily realize what she was giving up when she came back. You must give up your heart's desire. Well, does that mean Quinlan was actually her heart's desire? Did she think she was giving up something else in that moment
Mhm.
there? Only to realize that, she has to honor this commitment. She came back and it really was Quinlan was her desire. So now she has to find something else. And anyways, it's a question worth pondering. I don't think I
It
necessarily have an answer
is.
right now. So,
No,
and I,
give me lots to think about, you have.
yeah, I don't want to say it was something that was left bad. I think it's something I think that's one of the highlights of this is that we have something to consider. Okay. Well, there's a lot to discuss and we just spent 10 minutes on that. But so we next find her working security at the starport. She's taking tickets and admitting people to and from these transports. And then a kid shows up that needs transport but doesn't have enough to pay for the fare. And then the proprietor of this place wants to kick him out. But as Asajj is trying to herd him out, uh, especially after this kid tried to use a Jedi mind trick on the proprietor,
Yeah.
opens the door and sees those stormtroopers, and she immediately closes it and brings him back in. Which, okay, so now she's looking out for someone she's clearly identified as a Jedi. What'd you think about that change in her character?
Well, I think part of that was more of a knee-jerk reaction kind of a thing, because I think some of it was that here's this kid coming along and now, she had this nice quiet life and he's just, really jostling that all out of proportion. But then again, some of that I think might be part of her purpose for having her new beginnings is by getting some sort, like, this is her, kind of kick from the force to say, oh, okay, maybe this person can be who you can mentor and leave a legacy with. But I think that all happened so quickly that I don't think there was much, she didn't have much time to think about that, but perhaps that was what the force was planning for her. Who knows?
Yeah, I guess. I mean, she doesn't strike me as someone who's like listening to the will of the force when it
Hmm.
comes down to this. It is her reaction was, you need to go. And when he's kind of pleading with her, she's like, you should be able to handle this yourself. You should be able to find people to take care of this. And he's like, there is nobody. And then when
Hmm.
she sees the stormtroopers, she pulls him back in and hides him behind the desk.
Right.
And then when things deteriorate, she pulls out her lightsaber and takes it to the stormtroopers when all she had to do is say, there he is, and let him fend
Yep.
for himself. She didn't have to do any of all that. And then her next instinct is to get him out of trouble, to get him to a ship and off that planet. It's not, she's a different person than when we saw in the Clone Wars
Yes.
here. And so, at any rate, this is some of the growth I'm talking about here. What we saw from her in Dark Disciple was a character that was changing from the former
Mhm.
assassin who was bent on revenge, to one of the last things that she said to Quinlan before she died was, you know, I can't remember exactly how she put it, but it was, you chose loving me over hating him.
Yes.
And, so she, I'm not saying she necessarily fell on the light side in that, but she definitely rejected the dark side when it
Mhm.
came down there too. And I never really got the impression that she was necessarily embracing the light side here, but this is much more down that path.
Oh, for sure. And it also explains, I think, later on too, why she was so, wanting to have Omega and maybe trying to figure out if Omega was force sensitive. This was sort of the genesis of that path as well, and where that ended up coming from.
Yeah, yeah. Although she was quite convinced that Omega was not. And then
Mhm.
it's like, if you're gonna do this, you have to come with me, and you're better off with them. Was
Yeah.
her opinion at the time. And that's the other thing. Like, well, when does this take place in relation to the Bad Batch?
Oh, I think it's clearly before.
Okay, but then what happens to this kid?
He must go his own way. I think we just need a whole animated series on Asajj Ventress and this
There you go.
kid. There you
Right.
go.
Yeah. So yeah, big question, but we're getting ahead of ourselves
Lots of
here.
questions.
So yeah, so this kid, whose name we'll find out in the second episode, he thinks she's a Jedi, and it's not till later that she's gonna find out what it is. But they get to the starport, and this is when things go awry because an Inquisitor shows up. As an aside, the banter between these two starts before they get to the starport, and it goes throughout all three of these episodes, and it's priceless. This
Yes.
This is classic Star Wars banter. It is so well written. It's just like, you smell like a Jedi. Lines like that. And it's like, you did have a friend, and her groaning and rolling her eyes, but without overdoing it this entire time. The banter as it's written and is performed is A+ throughout these 3 episodes.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And it's the young kid is young enough to be believable in
Mhm.
terms of the way that he would react to different things, and it's so naive and innocent in a lot of ways, even though he is a Jedi Padawan that has seen a lot through, Order 66 and whatnot.
Right. But he, during that whole trek to the starport, he brings up the path, which she knows nothing about, and he mentions Quinlan Voss,
Yes.
which gets her attention. But even in that moment, she's not ready to join him on the ship to find this path and find Quinlan when it comes down to it. So maybe that's part of the answer to our question from earlier. It's
Mhm.
she's intrigued, but does to your point, is she can't get entangled with that. She doesn't want to get entangled with that, or she's lost a desire, or she's trying to honor whatever vow she took by basically choosing life again there. But anyways, something
Mhm.
to consider. So they get to the starport, and then the Inquisitor shows up. This guy's kind of early looking. What'd you think?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, he was very different, type of Inquisitor than we've ever seen before, so I'd love to
Mhm.
know what species he was. He
Right.
seemed humanoid, but
Yeah, we got to see Asajj use 2 lightsabers. She got to use hers
yes,
and the kid, which is cool because she was down to the one yellow lightsaber. But then
very
she got to use.
Anakin Skywalker-ish against
Right.
Dooku.
Yeah, and then so she got to, so classic Asajj using 2 blades, and he gets the drop on her, but then the kid uses both lightsabers to run him through the back, which I guess you got to do what you got to do, but it seemed a little Jedi like. I was a little surprised this Inquisitor didn't like dissolve into the green gas that we
Mm,
saw Marak and
mhm.
the other Inquisitor that was in
I
Tales of the
didn't
Jedi.
even Yeah, I didn't even think of that. Didn't even think of that. But yeah, this
Yeah.
kid got the drop on him pretty quick,
Hmm.
that's for sure.
But then the stormtroopers arrive and they get on the ship, and this is when Asajj reveals who she really is. She was a commander in the Separatist Alliance, Count Dooku's lead assassin, and she's probably killed several people he knows personally. Her name is Asajj Ventress. Mic drop. Ending to that
Oh,
first
great.
episode there.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I thought that was that was such a good way to end
Like,
that first
"Honey,
one.
you don't know who you're dealing with."
Right. But then the next episode, Friends, starts off with that shuttle landing. The kid is suspicious of Asajj. It's like, you kill people I know. And then her response is, are you going to keep going on about that? It's like, I
Oh,
came
yeah,
clean. What do you want?
exactly.
uh, and then, it's like, we're better off with each other. And then she says, and he's like, well, I don't know. You could, kill me. He's like, if I wanted to kill you, you'd be dead already. And then his response is, that's not funny. Again, I can't do it justice by repeating these lines here, but the banter on screen is an A+.
Mhm, I agree.
Yeah. So she's looking for someone that can give them information that's going to lead them to the path in Quinlan. And that person is Latts Razzi, who we've seen before in the Clone Wars. And they show up in a cool little battle with a Basilisk, her and
Yeah,
C-21 Highsinger fighting this guy. And this comes right after Asajj was talking about how he needs to quit acting like a Jedi. And,
yes.
the line, you smell like a Jedi, comes up. And so their bounty ends up getting killed, to which Lat says, well, that's unfortunate. And then his response is like, yes, the loss of life is always tragic. And she's like, no, he's worth more alive than he is dead. So you know, it gets back to Saj, but just he's like, you carry yourself like a Jedi, you act like a Jedi, and that's proof right there that
Mhm.
of exactly what she's talking about. So what did you think about having Latts show up in this?
Oh my gosh, love it. It's such a great blast from the past, and just seeing her with her combat prowess and her, boa that she uses to attack people is just great.
Mhm.
I love her to death. Although I have to say, I didn't realize that she went around barefoot, and she's got some big feet. Like,
Got
she was
some
sticking
gnarly,
them right
gigantic toes.
sticking him right in the kid's face there at one point. But no, I really did appreciate seeing her again, and I always liked her in the Clone Wars,
Mhm.
and so it was, yeah, it was awesome.
And Highsinger was really cool in this one, especially when we
Yeah.
get a little bit later and he's just taking it to all those stormtroopers.
Mhm.
Did the kind of like the spinning torso thing, like IG-11 and the Mandalorian, similar type of tactics there. But the
Right.
kid finally gives us his name. He says Lyco. If you go to IMDb, you get his full name, which is Lyco Strata. And he kind of outs himself because he talks about how he knows about the quad range detectors on the Venators, which is
Mhm.
something that Latts says only a Jedi or a clone would know, and he's no clone.
Right.
And this is revealed while they're making their deal. They're going to help Latts get this part of a shield generator, and then she's going to give them the intel that she's got about the path on this. And we've got a little who can you trust type of a thing, because Latts is telling Lyco, you can't trust her, that this is, she's, never does anything unless it serves her own interests. And in the meantime, Asajj has already just warned Lyco about Latts. You can't trust her. And it's like, I thought she was your friend. It's like, no, she's an acquaintance has got intel we want there. So Lyco is kind of in a delicate position between these two.
He is indeed. Yeah, and really with this whole thing too, I mean, you've also got Latz who, like you said, she's not to be trusted. She was
Mhm.
ready to leave them behind, especially leave Asajj behind, and she was supposed to be her friend,
Right,
quote unquote.
right.
Yeah.
So they get down to the job, and they're this. I love this. I love the scene. I love the backdrop of it. We got these star destroyers being built. Latts doesn't even at this point they don't even know what they are. All Latts can say it's a new type of ship, but the shield generators, those gigantic domes, those orbs that we see mounted on the top of the star destroyers, it's obvious what they are, and they got to
Mhm.
get in there and get a piece of one of these things. And you see the star destroyers being assembled in the distance. This little mini series here, these 3 episodes, again, the longest one was like 15 minutes long, but they told so much story and worked so much action at the same time. And world building at such a masterful rate. I mean, I don't know of anything that's more efficient when it comes to Star Wars storytelling.
No, I totally agree, and I mean, just the amount of animated assets that were in
Mhm.
these 3 episodes is just incredible.
Right. So they invade the base, they sabotage one of the crawlers. It's got one of these orbs on it, and then they crawl up in the middle to get one of the things. But then things kind of go awry when Highsinger gets found out by an Imperial agent. And then he starts firing with the stormtroopers. The orb kind of activates. It gets knocked off its the crawler and starts rolling. They lose the piece they need, and they report that to Latts, but they need an evac. And this is when she turns on them and said, she tells to C-21, it's like, new plan. We're taking the kid. They're going to take the Jedi and turn him in because he's worth more than the piece they wanted. And so he's kind of out of the frying pan into the fryer. That they get back aboard. Eventually, Latts' ship, and they subdue them and get the intel they need. But again, I don't want to try and break down all the action moment by moment, but again, classic Star Wars right there.
Oh,
So
yeah.
incredibly well done.
Oh, yeah, and I love the sphere and how they were having to run, with the sphere, and I thought that was really clever.
Mhm, mhm. But the character growth in this episode, I think, really, I don't know. Do you think there's growth in this episode on anybody, or is it really come in the next episode?
I think it comes more in the next episode. This is a good setup for it though, but
Mhm,
I did appreciate the fact that, it's obviously setting up the idea of the strengthening of the relationship between Asajj and Lyco as almost like a master and apprentice
mhm.
because they faced some adversity with trust and this
Yeah.
this little side adventure.
Right, because Lyco's the one that gets the intel from Latts, and
Mhm.
Asajj is like, "Are you gonna tell me what's on it?" And his response is, "Sure, I trust you," out of that.
Yeah, and you
And
could see her
so
face. She was like, "You what?
yeah. Well, I
Are you
mean,
sure about that?"
yeah, I mean, she put it on the line for him
Mhm,
and all
mhm.
this, and in the end, she was the one that was right. It was Latts that betrayed them and not
Right,
her
but
on
that's
all
not
this.
something she's used to hearing.
No, no, I mean, she doesn't trust anyone, and she's used to nobody trusting her,
Right,
because the last time
exactly.
she really trusted anyone was Dooku, and, that we saw how that worked. So,
Mhm. Well,
okay.
Quinlan, but
Yeah, but that's different sort of
that's a
circumstance here.
different.
Yeah,
Yes.
she's kind of trying to be a loner when it's all said and done, and she's got a reputation that most people aren't willing to forgive when they know who she is. So
Mhm. Mhm.
speaking of people who know who she is, we get to our final episode here, and that's one warrior to another. So we're on some unknown planet. It's rocky. It kind of looks like it could be Tatooine, or perhaps that planet from season 1 of The Mandalorian that had the Jawas from whatever, I can't remember the name of that world, that Quill was on.
Mhm.
But they're on a mutant Yobi looking thing, and
Yeah.
they're looking for the path. They're out of water when they come across a homestead that's got battle droids set up outside, deactivated battle droids, and Asajj's response is effective as always. So, um, the rapport from these two is developed some. She's out of water, her canteen's empty, and he offers her. She shrugs it off. She shrugs it off. She finally takes it, only to find out that it's empty too. So he's playing a joke on her. Um,
That was classic. I loved it.
yeah. But then we meet the granddaughter and grandfather. They have no other names. And it turns out that they've settled here. They're doing some farming, but there are some raiders that stand between them and their ability to get water. And the last time he went out to get it, he ran into them, and now he's kind of confined to this wheelchair device. And they're gonna give Asajj and Lyco some information about Cypher Canyon, which is where they need to go to find the path, if they'll help get the water. And he's recognizes Asajj. He knows who she is because he was a separatist as well. And he makes interesting comments like, turns out our side was right. And Asajj is like, no, both sides got it wrong, which was pretty insightful on her part.
Yes, absolutely. You talk about major character arc growth right there. You could just see where she was, you know, imparting her knowledge to them from her experiences.
Yeah, and it kind of foreshadows what's going to happen at the end of the episode, because
Mhm.
they go out to get the water at the spring, and then they run into these raiders. We have to that speeder they have collapses under the weight of the water. Only for Lyco gets it up and running again. Then they have to flee from that. And then it turns out Lyco can actually talk with these people, and he puts two and two together and realizes that the water that they've been collecting actually belongs to the raiders, and that's the whole source of the conflict. Is that some of these raiders have been killed, and now the grandfather has been injured trying to get the water. Something's got to get worked out, but he doesn't know any better. He's dedicated his life to fighting. He sees an enemy. He can't put that conflict behind them and work out a truce. He doesn't know any other way. And this is the growth for Asajj, is that
Mhm.
she's learned another way.
Yes. And I have to say, this is like classic Clone Wars plot right
Oh
here.
yeah.
You go to this planet, you misunderstand the natives, somebody negotiates, it's usually Obi-Wan,
Yeah. I'm
kind of
thinking of that
thing.
Pantoran episode with the Tars.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And so, and Lyco's the one that is able to get through to them and make this happen and have this truce and this understanding between them and I feel good and life is good. So, I mean, it was such a great callback to that feeling and all the Clone Wars feels that you got from that. So I appreciated the fact that they were keeping that kind of tone.
Yeah. The other vibe I got here was Pocahontas. The
Oh,
whole
yeah.
notion that both sides are savages. He calls them
Right.
animals. It's like, she's telling him that it can be worked out with blasters. Like, they're animals.
Right.
Savages. But so at any rate, yeah. And then this is where the first time she finally, because she stands up for Lyco after the grandfather is like, you're just gonna listen to him. Is like, he's my friend. And the look on Lyco's face is just like, priceless in that moment.
Yeah.
She comes out and it says that. So
That's good stuff.
they are true to their word. They get something worked out, and then one of the raiders leads Asajj and Lyco to the canyon where the path is, and we see a ship with a bunch of people getting on board, and Lyco runs down to jump aboard, and then he realizes that Asajj is not following him. And when he asks why, her response is, "This is your path. You're a good Jedi. You deserve this. You better get going, kid." That sentence is, those sentences, four of them there, say a whole lot. But that second one, "You're a good Jedi," there,
Yes.
she's actually complimenting and praising a Jedi. All of this. I get she rejected the dark side. I get that she rejected what Dooku and Sidious and all of them were doing and stuff like that. But that's still not the same thing as kind of offering praise to someone for being a good Jedi. There, that really stood out
Yeah.
to me.
Oh, yeah, and I think this goes all the way back to Asajj's origin story
Mhm.
in that, I feel like this is all she ever wanted for herself, before things went sour for her.
Yeah,
So, I think in that way, it's kinda come full circle that now she gets to be the mentor even though she's letting him go at this point, or she thinks she is, and, giving him the kind of words that she would have wanted to hear.
yeah. But even that first sentence, "This is your path." So
Yes.
what's not said is, "This is not my path." And
Mhm.
when you follow up, "You're a good Jedi," she's saying, "I'm not a good Jedi. No, I'm
Mhm.
not a good Force user. You deserve this." She's saying, essentially saying, "I don't deserve this." And
Ah,
what she's
yeah.
saying about him, she's essentially saying the opposite about herself on this. And so, I also kind of wonder when we're talking about, you must give up your heart's desire. Is this talking about that? This is your path. You're a good Jedi. You deserve this. Is that actually what her desire is? Getting
Oh.
back to her path is, you know, being able to be accepted by the Jedi, being a good Jedi, walking. That's what her initial path was before her master got killed and she was
Mhm.
taken in by Dooku.
Mhm. Good call. I like that.
Yeah.
Like that
But
take.
she's not alone for long. She gets back to her
Yeah.
mount and starts to leave, and then all of a sudden, Lyco comes running up to her, and she's like, "Hey, wait!" And he's looking. He's like, "You're supposed to be on that ship," and his response is, "I figured I was better off with you." And she says, "Like, you missed the ship, didn't you?" But his response, he basically said he just wanted to be with her, and then they gallop off into the sunset. I don't know. There's a whole lot more that needs to be said about that, except for it was extremely touching. I love the ending on that. I sincerely hope that, assuming this comes before the Bad Batch, that they continue to be a pair after that. That she just left him somewhere to go take care of this business with Omega, and then came back and they continued on their adventures together, because this was such a good duo, and the banter between them two was fantastic. I would love to see more come out of this with these two characters in the future.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so,
That's what I'm saying. Yeah, we need a
yeah,
we need a whole animated series on this.
mhm. Yeah, yeah.
It could be done.
Oh, definitely. This was just so good, and like I said, it was so efficient. I mean, none of these were more than 15 minutes, and they got so much storytelling done in that time.
Mhm.
What could they
Mhm.
do with a full format, series?
Oh, indeed. And, to your point too, if you like you said, if she leaves him behind to go do her thing with Omega, I mean, maybe they get to a point too where maybe Lyco doesn't end up eventually going off to the path.
Yeah,
And that is his path eventually, and then Asajj is okay to do her own thing.
yeah. 'Cause I
Let's
don't
see
think she
it.
would abandon him, and at this point, I
No.
don't think he'd abandon her either. I
Mm-mm.
think that there might be some sort of necessity that's involved, but um, yeah, there's more adventures to tell, and let's get them, please. So,
Definitely.
all right. Any other final thoughts before we wrap it up?
I think we've hit it all, honestly. It was
Yeah.
a great little three-story arc, and like you said, it really packed in a lot in these short episodes, and definitely, quality over quantity of time, but, yeah, we just need more.
Yeah, Nika Futterman did
Not
such a good
enough.
job with Asajj.
Always,
The betrayal
always.
here. But if you get the chance, go back and watch other like early episodes of the Clone Wars and see how the voice has changed over time. It's
Oh,
the
yeah.
the accent is softened quite a bit, and I think it's part of it is because, like, the banter here is not the banter that she has with, like, Obi-Wan and Anakin as an opponent here,
Mhm.
where she's trying to deliver barbs that hurt, to get them off their game. It's just kind of a, even before they really acknowledge each other as friends, it's almost more of a teasing and a kind of a put down type of a thing going on here. But
Right, right. Well, I did see an interview with Nika Futterman, and she was talking about the evolution of Asajj's voice,
oh yeah,
and she did that purposely to show how Asajj has actually evolved and changed over the years. I think it was on
oh,
Slash Film, I wanna say. I can't
okay,
remember.
okay. We'll
Yeah.
have to go check that out. All right. All right, well then, thank you all for joining us for this episode of Podcast Stardust and our discussion of the Asajj Ventress episodes from Tales of the Underworld. We hope you enjoyed it, and if you want to make sure you don't miss our discussion of the Cad Bane episodes, will be coming up in a few weeks. Make sure you hit that subscribe button on your podcatcher, and that'll get downloaded for you automatically. And once you subscribe, we'd love it if you could rate and review the show. That would greatly help us and others find the show. And then if you want to find all of the past episodes beyond what's on your podcatcher, which is likely 100 or 200 episodes, head over to retrozapp.com where the entire catalog of shows can be found, as well as all the other great shows that are on the network. Jay, you'll remind everybody what those social media contacts are and where else we can found online.
Absolutely, Dennis. We are on Facebook and Instagram conveniently at Podcast Stardust. And we do have our Pinterest boards that have all kinds of fun things Star Wars. So you have to go check those out. And we also maintain our YouTube and YouTube music outlets as well. So you can head over to both of those, like, subscribe, and share those out. And let us know what you thought of these 3 episodes of Tales of the Underworld, because we would love to hear your thoughts and reactions as well. And we will share those out on the show. And we also have our TeePublic store. The link to that will be in our show notes, and you can pick up all kinds of fun merch over there with Podcast Stardust logos on them, even water canteens, no water included, but canteens are over there. So there you go.
All right. What's going on in cosplay?
Well, cosplay always rolling on and on. Over on Instagram is j.snips cosplay, where you can catch me as Ahsoka, Hera, the fourth sister, my original concept Mandalorian, and much, much more.
All right. Upcoming on the show on Friday, we are talking about the last 3 episodes of season 2 of Andor. Oof. Here we are. And then on Monday, we'll be getting back into recent Star Wars news. So thanks for listening to episode 886 of Podcast Stardust, everyone. Have a great rest of your week. And until next time, may the Force be